Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Levine Show. If you've been watching us today, this is our third show of the day. The first one was an interview with Jim Ferguson from the UK. We were talking about NotMyKing.ca and some of the geopolitical issues going on around the world, including WEF and other topics. So if you want to go check that out, please do. And then I was also on with a libertarian. So Bennett Hunter, I believe it was. If you want to go check that out, I have it on my streams and his as well. Very good conversation from a libertarian who literally wants no government. If he could get his way, there would be no government at all. We had some good back and forth, and I think at the end he believes that small government would be a great step, so we can head in that direction, and a republic might be an excellent one as well. And hello to everybody out in Ontario. If you're watching, you're voting, so you're having an election. And something that's interesting is it looks like Doug Ford, maybe we can get into that a little bit with our Ontario friend, Bruce Pardy, but it looks like Doug Ford. And what's interesting here is Doug is going to walk away with more votes than Mark Carney. So Mark Carney is looking at being our PM, and none of you are voting for that unless you're part of the Liberal Party. And part of this conversation is, things exactly like that. Why could we have an elected head of government, which would be the PM, without being elected? So we can actually have someone in that position without being elected. And our head of state, as the king, he is also not elected. So at some point in the near future, we may have two leaders, a head of state, head of government, not elected. If that's a system you like, well, congratulations, you already got it. But if it's something that you're not happy with and maybe you want to see some changes to, and we don't have to make dramatic changes, but maybe some incremental changes, well, then this is the episode for you. Because what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the initiative that I put together a few weeks ago called NotMyKing.ca. And what it is open the conversation, open the doors to the conversation about what this could mean, what it could look like, what are the steps, what are the practical steps, what are the radical steps, and let's have that conversation. We're not going to do it tomorrow because there's going to be a lot of steps involved, but we can have the conversation now. So what I've done is I invited Katherine Kowalchuk to join us today. She's an Alberta lawyer. She's part of the independent movement in Alberta. She's part of the Pardy as well, an interim leader for a while there, because she understands that Albertans have been looking at this for quite some time. Is now the time? Maybe. But she's definitely got the pulse. So she's going to share some of that with us. And also some of the ideas. What does she think an independent Alberta could look like? And then we also got Bruce Pardy coming back. He is an awesome professor, law professor out of Ontario. So if you're lucky enough to go to Queen's, you might see him in the hallway and check out his stuff. But he's been on a few times, and we're having these conversations around what constitutionally we can do for Canada. Do we have to make dramatic changes, incremental changes? And if we had a clean slate, what would it look like? What could we learn from America and other countries when it comes to their constitutions? Do we just copy and paste, or do we copy edit and see what we can do with it? I think it's a good time to have the conversation because we may not be able to get a constitution on a federal level right away, but provincial, there's an opportunity there. And Alberta might be the place for that. So I've had lots of conversations, and there's lots of desire to have this movement in Alberta pick up a little bit of steam. So without further ado, let me bring in Katherine and Bruce. Good evening, you two. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you, Jason, for having me. Hi, Bruce.
Hello, Katherine. Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. As you heard, I want to kind of get to it because we have a very strict timeline today. But Katherine, thank you so much for saying yes to coming on at last minute. And Bruce, I reached out yesterday. You said absolutely. So thanks for taking some time. So as you heard in my little intro here, maybe you checked out some of my posts over the last little bit. I'm looking into this conversation about becoming a republic, whether it's provincial, federal, both, none. But now that we have Trump pushing the issue about us being a 51st state, there's a large movement of people that are kind of getting behind that. And what they're really doing, Katherine, is they're getting behind the idea of a republic, whether they really realize it or not, and being independent from the monarch, whether they realize it or not. So this conversation's starting, and I think it's a time to have another one. So in Alberta, what is your feeling lately since Trump has been having these conversations about people in Alberta? Are we thinking about jumping ship and separating?
Well, I think there's definitely been a revival, especially since Trump has made his remarks about Canada becoming a 51st state. Alberta has had decades where independence movements have ebbed and flowed, and actually they're chronicled quite nicely through the work done by Michael Wagner, who's a historian author here in Alberta. And so this is not something new to Alberta, but I think what we're seeing now is the revival of this being an actual, I'm not going to say legitimate, because it is already legitimate, because we already have a mechanism to separate under the Clarity Act in Canada right now. But what this is doing, I think, is opening up now the real possibility of real change to occur. And we're having this not only because of Trump's comments, but it's the culmination of, I think, the overall dissatisfaction of many, many, many citizens as a result of many things that the government is doing and not doing. And I think a lot of us, 4 or 5 years ago, had our eyes opened up fairly wide in terms of the inadequacies and incompetencies of our governments, both provincially and nationally. So I think this is a really good time, and I really think that there's going to be a groundswell of more people, especially in Alberta, getting behind this movement for at least to hold a referendum to become an independent nation from Canada. Definitely, whether or not it's the 51st state, I think that would be kind of a part two initiative. But I think what I'm hearing now, and maybe it's because the algorithms with X, I don't know, but I'm seeing a lot of interest in this, and as well with people who I didn't necessarily think would be in support of it, something like this, like Bruce Pardy. When Bruce, and I talked a little bit ago about this, and another person from Ontario who's in the freedom movement contacted me not too long ago saying, okay, when are you guys going to get into gear and get this referendum question on the ballot? Let's go. And I said, oh, wait a second, you're in Ontario. What are you talking about? So this is it, and that's the direct result of government failing in absolutely every area.
Completely true. And these people in Ontario, they're paying attention to Alberta and what we can do here in Alberta. And Bruce, I had him on just a little while ago talking about the proroguing of Parliament, and this topic came up because it was starting to really heat up. And at that time, we were talking about how it was like the perfect storm coming together. And this morning, when I was talking to Jim Ferguson, he even highlighted that the love for the king is not the same as the queen. Like, everybody's attitude is even different with this guy versus the queen. And yeah, a lot of things are coming together. So with this additional swelling in Alberta coming back, like, we're actually starting to talk about this again a lot more. People like Bruce have noticed that Alberta's the place for it. Now, Bruce, when you were on here, that's basically what you said. Alberta, we're waiting for you. If you can take this next step, you're in a position to do it.
Yeah. Let's go, Alberta. This is your moment. Things have come together. We've got Trump knocking on the door. But we've also had the curtain pulled back in many ways over the past 5 years. For a lot of people during COVID, for example, people discovered to their surprise that the country that they thought they lived in, the country they had in their head, does not actually exist. And governments have been failing at things, both provincial and federal governments have been failing at things now for quite a while. It's just coming to a head, I think. And given the changes that are happening in the US, and given the rhetoric that we're getting from Trump, and given the movement that Catherine is referring to, that's been around for a while, mm-hmm. you've gotta recognize when you have opportunities and when the door is open. You've got to be prepared to walk through it at the right moment, because these things don't last forever. So I'm not suggesting necessarily that Alberta has to be the 51st state. I agree with Catherine about that. But if something is going to happen, it has to happen soon. It has to happen now, because everything is aligned now for change. It's a long process, as you alluded to, Jason. There are steps in it, and I've been trying to resist people's inclination to want to know what's going to happen at the end, because nobody knows that. Nobody knows whether or not Alberta might end up as an independent country, or might end up as part of the US, or what the particular path might be, or what the obstacles will be, or what the arrangement with Canada will be. Nobody knows that, because it's a political process, a legal one, but also primarily political. And there's a lot of uncertainty in it. But there's a lot of uncertainty whenever these things happen. Just think of the uncertainty that faced the Americans when they decided that they did not want to be under the thumb of the king anymore. I mean, they had to go through a revolution. Now, hopefully that's not going to be the case here. Nobody wants violence. And fortunately, we have precedents in place that at least suggest what the beginning of the process is for a peaceful resolution of differences. But time to get on the horse. If we mean this, and if there are enough people who are interested in it, and it might not be a majority yet, but that doesn't matter. The majority will come if things go well. But those people who are interested in this, and I think there are a lot. Even from Ontario, I've now had contact with a lot of people who say, yeah, this is the time. So we got to get on the horse and see where we can gallop off to.
He's painting quite the picture here for us, Catherine. We have horses. We can gallop. It might be the time right now.
There's I can tell you that there is stuff happening right now. Like nothing is made public quite just yet, but there is going to be we're working on a coordinated effort for this movement, for people to get behind this movement, and a call to action for people that will be legitimate, and a mechanism for people to really support. So this is what's happening right now. It takes time. There's lots of moving parts in some respects, but I find that with my experience in this area, well, not this area in particular, but in the freedom movement, or the freedom movement, having been a resistor of all the government mandates during COVID, there's just personalities that but I think, putting that aside, I think people are coming together now because they recognize that we've given our governments more than enough opportunity to make changes, and meaningful changes, and not just hold committees, or for instance, in Alberta, put out a report or two that with respect to COVID, for instance, or equalization, for instance. We even had a referendum in Alberta to stop equalization payments, and nothing's happened as a result of that. And we're seeing this same pattern happen over and over again with our elected officials, that they might commission a report, or they might start something, but that report ends up placating the base. Hopefully the base forgets about the report once it's released, and then nothing ever comes of it. And we're seeing this pattern. It's unfolding again here in Alberta. We don't have currently a government or in Alberta that is supportive of an independent solution, despite the fact of what Danielle Smith claims to support in terms of her sovereignty rhetoric. There's absolutely no teeth behind that. And she's quite, seems to be anyway, by her actions, quite committed to continuing on with a Team Canada approach. And notwithstanding, during her leadership race, she was very clear that she would entertain this independence movement in a debate that she was in, that she would entertain this, yet she seems to have forgotten what she has promised her Albertans and her base. So it's time for everybody to get involved, and for everybody to get behind this movement, because this is really the only thing, I think, that will get Ottawa's attention anyway, to even open up negotiations, even to start with if there's going to be a hope for any changes with our constitution. We have to start with this, because that history shows that it was very successful when Quebec did it. They didn't succeed with the referendum necessarily, but they did succeed in opening up the constitution, and they were successful in moving the needle in that regard when that was occurring. So I think that right now we've tried everything. We've tried diplomacy, we've tried strong letter writing, we've tried court actions, and none of it is getting us anywhere. And so it's now time to, what I'm going to be advocating for is a change in government in Alberta, because we need to have people who are actually have demonstrated and actually want to see the change, and are committed to doing it.
And that might be the path forward. Like, I understand that Danielle might be able to entertain the idea, but we need a little bit more than that to get behind it. So that might be a path where there's somebody who comes forward and says, hey, let's do this. We want a republic. And that's what they're running on. And we get a change in leadership, or we get their attention. And we know that Danielle, if she gets enough support from the public, she does move with it. So there's a possibility that there's enough groundswell, grassroots support for it. She may take interest and then start to entertain it. I think
but you know what? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jason, but the thing is, like, I understand that, when people put pressure on an elected official, and then she'll make the changes, right? But really what we need in this province and what we need in this country is actually real leadership. We need a person or people that are elected, who aren't afraid to say what is on their mind, and who aren't afraid to clean house, and who aren't afraid to move this forward. And so we all know that people, right or wrong, want a leader. And so they need a leader to tell them, from an honest and authentic perspective, what it is, and then that they're going to do, and then help convince people. Like, we're in like a marketing campaign here, and it's no different. If we had a strong leader, that if she would come out and would say, yes, we need an Alberta pension plan, yes, we need an Alberta police force, and was strong with that, and put resources and a campaign behind that to educate Albertans, to let them know about how good it could be in Alberta if we made these changes, and if we started to collect our own taxes and do all of these things, then people would believe her. And this is the thing, right? We don't have Colonel Redmond, when he was discussing the failures of the government by not following the emergency plan during COVID, he was, I agree with him. Like, he was clear that we need that one person to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do it this way, but here's the path forward. And I think she would be surprised at how much support she would actually get if she would actually just lead, rather than doing what she's doing.
Right. So I think, I guess I'm just going to defend it a little bit, where she says we'll entertain it, but she didn't necessarily say she would initiate it. Now, if someone else initiates it, or another group initiates it and brings it forward, that might be one of the fastest paths to getting it done. Because if we can get Danielle's support on it, then we can get a referendum. Now, we can do a legitimate public referendum without her. That's one path forward. And there's a lot of ways we can do things without her. In fact, we can do it opposite, in opposition to her. There's other ways to do it too. And that could be through the UCP. That could be through public. We could be the best PR for it. But ultimately, ideally, it's consensual. We're all working on it together in the same direction. So if we can find a way to guide this path for Danielle and others to get behind this, there may be a faster way to do it than replacing her, or looking at some recall or some other paths. But we've got lots of good options on the table here. One of the ones I want to kind of talk about here with Bruce is, what would a templated constitution look like? Just broad strokes. What are some of the things that would make a lot of sense for a province like Alberta to start looking at implementing? Broad strokes again. You don't have to get into like 20 points of it, but what could we look at? Because if we present and provide, drafts and support, and 100,000 people on a mailing list that are ready to get a referendum going, this might move the needle.
Yeah. So one of the things I fear most about this is achieving incremental change. Like if you managed in Alberta to, fiddle with equalization so it wasn't so irritating, if you got an Alberta pension plan, and if you got local collection of taxes, and you adjusted this and that, that is not what I'm talking about.
Oh, no, I agree. I agree.
Right?
Let's hear it.
I'm talking about something fundamentally different, which is what the Americans did. And see, the Americans at the time of their founding benefited from a group of men who had vision, who managed to put together a constitution with architecture that lasted, that had in it the checks and balances. And now, mind you, it's not perfect. It's had its troubles. I think there's some flaws in it. It can be improved upon, I think, but it's a much better model than the one that we have. And so part of my fear is that Alberta takes it onto itself to establish itself, to establish its independence. But in so doing, it gets rid of the Canadian influences, but then reproduces the model for itself, and then creates inside itself the same kind of trouble. So I would advocate for a different kind of constitution, a constitution that's more like the American one than the present Constitution of Canada or the present Constitution of Alberta. Please don't just amend your Alberta Constitution. That's not going to change anything. I think we have to start, maybe not from scratch, but certainly to rethink what a republic looks like in Alberta terms. What does an Alberta republic look like, as opposed to the province of Alberta under the Canadian Crown? And so there's lots of ways to do this, and I think there's lots of opportunity for people to come together to think, and that's what the founders of America did. They had I'm not saying they all agreed all the time. That's just not true. But they had a bunch of smart people with vision, and they worked through what they thought the best model was, with a thought to a long-lasting future. And so the thing I want to steer us away from is the idea that if we get rid of the right people and get the other right people in, that we'll be fixing the problem. And I don't think that's true at all. I think we have to change the kind of government that we have and the kind of constitution that we want.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you, Bruce, with that. But I think at the same time, we do need to be mindful of like, there's not going to be one person who's going to be able to change this, but at the same time, we do need the willingness, right? And for that to happen, we do need to see some change. And for one, my personal opinion is that, I don't want to have Canada replicated within Alberta.
Exactly. So,
I don't want it to separate and then to have the same structure that we have necessarily, mostly because I'm not a socialist, and I don't like that type of bloated big government spending. I'm more, as you and I have talked before, libertarian in my views, and do support smaller government and empowering people to get out of victimhood into personal responsibility. And so that's where I would like to see that. And I don't see right now really anywhere within Canada a strong government that has those, like, truly has those values, even though they call themselves a conservative government. They don't truly have those values, and they have demonstrated that they don't through I guess since my lifetime anyway. So that's kind of where we're at. So we do need to have a change of leadership within the movement, so that like a new Alberta, however it looks, I kind of prefer a constitutional republic, but again, like, however it looks at the end of the day, it does not just mirror what we have right now.
Agreed. We're on the same page. I totally agree with you, and I'm afraid that what will be necessary is a political force, a political movement that is substantial enough so that the powers that be cannot do otherwise in their own self-interest, but to follow along, or to run to the front of the parade as soon as the parade is going. Right?
Yeah.
That's going to be no easy task, and I understand. Oh, not even in Alberta, and you would know much better than I. I have a much better feel for what the public opinion is on these things. But I sense that even in Alberta, we're a long way from even a majority on these things. But Alberta is the best chance. Alberta seems to me to be the place where it is most likely that these sets of ideas will triumph. And so if we can imagine a constitutional order that yes, is a republic, but more than that, it provides for a government that is constitutionally small, limited. That is that liberty is part of the package in a structural architectural sense, in hopefully in an even better way than it is in the States, because that was one of the founding ideas of the American Constitution. But it's had its trouble. It has fared better than ours, no question about it. But still, it could be tweaked so that's the result that we get. But I agree with you. I mean, we're singing from the same book.
And I think your concerns are very founded, Catherine, because we saw this exact same thing happen with the Bill of Rights. So the UCP Black Hats created a draft. There was talk that was going to be the version, and then for whatever reason, there's a different one that came out, and Danielle abstained from voting for it. So you're right. We need a leader who's bold enough to stand up in those kind of situations, because that's an example, very recent, where that exact party that we're talking about working with kind of let us down. So I think when you're calling for a change in leaders, it's not even just the leader at the top, MLAs. There's other leaders in the movements, other leaders in organizations that maybe need to be changed as well. So that's a lot bolder and stronger. That's the direction we can start doing now. Like some of these things are things that we can start looking at now. Maybe not MLA so much, but other organizations or another grassroots effort, which has a new fresh face and new leadership bringing it forward. Is that where you think you can, like, the low hanging fruit now? Like we can start working on some of that now?
Oh, I think so. I think that there's always going to be crossover. The people who seem to be quite active right now, who are very interested in the idea of Alberta separating. I think there's a crossover with existing leaders within the community, but I think that what we're going to see is we're going to see this groundswell, and it's going to be it's going to be not only because of Trump's remarks, but it's also going to become very obvious to people quickly, especially when they're for instance, if Mark Carney becomes the unelected prime minister for a short time, or even if the Liberals manage to pull off another either minority government or majority, or if we see, and as we become disappointed with Pierre Poilievre, if he becomes the next prime minister of Canada, where what I suspect will be more in action, more of the same, different marketing campaign by the federal Conservatives, but taking us down the same path, continuing to spend recklessly and to support initiatives that don't support Canadians. So I think that it's just going to continue the momentum. All these things are going to converge to help this movement. And so I see, unfortunately, pain seems to be the touchstone for change for most people in their lives. And I think this is no different. I see if inflation is going to continue to increase, and obviously these tariffs are this looming threat of these tariffs are not good for either side of the border, but certainly not for Canadians. So I think as it becomes a little bit or a lot more difficult for Canadians to make ends meet, I think we're going to see people move towards this.
Completely true, and I believe there's going to be a lot more to come that we're not even aware of today that's going to contribute to this swell and to this movement. For example, empty shelves or Canadian suppliers can't keep up, and there's a lot of stuff going on. All of that's going to make people go, this system's broken. It's completely broken at this stage. And there may not be incremental changes available to us, like Bruce is saying. There needs to be a complete change. So, Bruce, let's just kind of hypothetically put it out there. There's enough support in Alberta now. Catherine's doing a great job. There's a lot of people reaching out saying, okay, let's go ahead and have this conversation and move a little bit further.
Yep.
I'm curious about the domino effect across Canada if Alberta
Yep.
starts to do that.
Yep.
What other provinces might start, turning their head? You know that little meme where there's that guy walking down the street with his woman and he's turning his head looking at the other one? Same type of thing. Like, how can we get the rest of Canada to go look at Alberta going, that looks pretty good.
Sure.
So the domino effect is what I'd like to see also start to work.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, those of us who are elsewhere in Canada want Alberta to do this for its own sake, but also because you'll start the cascade, and it will spread. The other candidates, and we're blue skying here, right? We're imagining what might happen.
Yeah.
It's all very gray at the moment, but if Alberta started down this path, I mean, I think one of the next candidates. And my colleague Lawrence Solomon has suggested that it should be Alberta and Newfoundland together. Maybe not at the same moment and not in coordination, but to the prospect of Alberta and Newfoundland either declaring themselves independent or indicating their interest in joining the United States would be very powerful. Two ends of the country. They both have the background. I mean, Newfoundland was the most recent entry into Confederation, and for a long time wanted, or some interest within Newfoundland wanted to join the United States. They had huge links. There's also, of course, Saskatchewan, who might want to join Alberta and become the Buffalo state. Who knows? Who knows? The fact of the matter is that if you have a meaningful movement in Alberta that looks like it's gaining ground, getting traction, then other things start to move. And I don't even think it's necessary that Alberta finish the job before the next, lot starts to move. I would guess, and I'm just guessing, but I would guess that the holdouts would be Ontario and Quebec, because they have the most to lose, or at least the elites in those provinces, the political establishment in those provinces have the most to lose, because they control the country. So their interests depend upon having a country the way it is. So they're going to resist. But so what? If Alberta goes,
do you think Quebec will resist, even though there is quite there seems to be good support for separation in Quebec?
Maybe not the leaders, but the people might support.
Well, the people might say, look, this is the time for us to do what we've always wanted to do. Let's become an independent country. That could well happen. But there are some dynamics that have always been part of the Quebec separation agenda that are not part of the Alberta one, to Alberta's credit. So you'll recall that when it came to Quebec, they were always interested in something like sovereignty association. That is, we want to leave Canada, but we don't really want to leave it. We'll keep the dollar and we'll keep the equalization and so on. That always made the whole plan a little bit questionable. Alberta, I expect to be much more clean than that. It's like, no, we want to go. And so there's a whole lot less negotiating to do on that basis. And who knows what Quebec's attitude would be if it became clear that they actually had to be completely independent. No support, no equalization, no Canadian dollar. I mean, who knows? I really don't know. Maybe they would decide they wanted to be part of the States too, although I suspect that might not be quite the natural thing for the Quebecers. I don't know. I really don't know. But it doesn't matter. My point is, it doesn't matter. If Alberta starts to go, it will be the leader, and there will be other things that follow. And I don't really care what they are right now. I just know that, or I suspect that it would start the cascade, and it's got to start somewhere, and there's no better candidate than Alberta.
And I think the timing is right for this, because if there was some sort of trouble or some sort of threat out of Ottawa when it comes to, like, say, military, I think the U.S. would say, let them do what they're doing. And that could be a deterrent for any ideas of going down that road. Because I think America has been very clear. They don't necessarily want to annex us, but they want to see us prosper and take care of our future and then be great partners and neighbors to them. Oh, hopefully she'll be
Oh,
popping
we
right
lost
back.
Catherine.
Yeah, and
Well,
the Caesar's might have done that.
yeah.
She's kind of still half here. We'll see if she comes back. But at the end of the day, I think this might be the good time, because we could get support out of the U.S., not crossing into our land and do anything like that. Here we go. Not crossing into our land and do anything like that, but being there so that we have a
Sorry,
bit of
folks. Sorry.
support. You back,
Well,
Catherine?
but I think we have to take their interest into account in this sense. One of the reasons that Trump is going on about the 51st state and trolling Trudeau and so on is that I think the Americans are aware of the threat that Canada now poses to them. I mean, for the longest time, we were benign. You know, we traded with them. We were a source of resources. We were nice people. We went along. All that is fine. Now, not so much, because our governments have been cooperating with the wrong sort of people, the wrong sort of governments, the wrong sort of organizations. And I think there's a constituency inside the American government that perceives us now as a threat, as in, through Canada, there are now hostile foreign powers knocking at their door. And so they have a self-interest in putting this right. And that's one reason why I'm a little bit inclined to lean on that interest to give leverage to the Alberta impetus to do this. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to become a state, but it does mean that we have to engage with them and say, we understand what you're talking about. We know there's a problem. We don't want any part of this anymore. We want to be your friend. We're on the same page as you. We have the same kinds of values as you in terms of your commitment to liberty and constitutional republican government and so on. And so, you reach out to those who can help you.
Now, Catherine, part of my idea is to make this a constitutional democratic republic. And the democratic portion of that isn't a democracy. It is the democratic process to create the republic. So instead of just some forefathers doing it, there's some input from the people. And we're all forefathers, and we all have some sort of say into it. And I think this would be a good way to advance it, have a bit of a template, a bit of an example of what we can get. But the major decisions, like, do we have... Well, for Alberta, it would be, do we have a premier or governor? Do we elect positions or not? Like, those big decisions could be made by the people. So that would be the democratic portion of creating this republic. What are your thoughts about including Albertans into this process?
Well, I think in theory it sounds really good. I think that it would be really nice to have that feedback from everybody. I mean, but the reality is that I think we need to be careful, because we're not the same homogeneous kind of population that we were before. And I without like I and I don't mean to be, let me just say it very plainly. The woke progressive agenda has infiltrated too much of our culture to be able to rely on giving that sort of responsibility, I think, to the population writ large. And I think that you're going to stymie the progress of the movement and ultimately the end goal by doing that. And I think and I don't, and it kind of sounds like dictatorial in some way, but I don't really mean it for that. I just think that people, and it kind of goes back to my comments before about leadership, right? People want strong, competent, thoughtful leaders that reflect who they are. And I think if you open it up, in respect to having it more, have everybody have a say, I think that it's going to stall the movement. And I don't think that there's enough of us that are at Edom, like, of the same mindset, in order to be able, as a population here in Alberta, to do something like that in a productive way.
Well, I'm going to
I
push
don't
back on
disagree.
that.
Sorry,
I'm
sorry,
just going to
Jason.
push
Go ahead.
back a little bit on that because I think you're not giving Albertans enough credit because I don't think anything DEI would pass in Alberta of all places. And I think that that's such a small group that they wouldn't actually reflect well on a democratic process. It's genuine. Now, I totally hear you because when you open up the Constitution and you're playing around tinkering, that's when stuff like that can sneak in and become part of the process. And Bruce has brought this up before when we're talking about the Constitution in general is who's at the table and who's having real input. So the way I see it is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Reddit, which is a website, but things get
Mhm.
upvoted and downvoted, and this is how things kind of bubble up when it comes to how you can, see what's popular, and without it being coming influenced by just a small group. And I think that's what our risk needs to be: is to not create a small group that has a lot of influence over many, because that's exactly how a small group governs or dictates a group of many. But I think that some of the things you're highlighting are very valid, and Bruce has brought this up as well, because this is a risk you run when you open up this conversation. We could forever have a constitution that says DEI is accepted. I doubt that, but I would like to see what this process looked like. Bruce, sorry for cutting in there.
Oh, no, it's all right. The thing is, I think you're both right. That's the dilemma,
Yeah.
right? If you open it up to, everybody to upvote or downvote, whatever, then it becomes impossible. On the other hand, you do not want to dictate things. This is a populist, democratic idea, right? So how do you handle that contradiction, that paradox? I think you do it, and Catherine's alluding to this, and I agree that you need leadership that says, here's an idea. Here's the
Yeah.
idea that a group of us are pursuing. How about it? What do you think about this? You don't give
Yeah.
them a blank slate, because then you get as many different ideas as you have people, and that's unmanageable.
Yeah.
But if you have a core group of people who have a vision and then are able to put the vision into play and say to everybody, look, this is the vision. What do you think? And this is a democratic process. And if you don't agree with the vision, then so be it. But we're trying to persuade you that the vision is a good one for all of us. And so let's talk about that. So you're doing both. You're being democratic, you're being popular, you're being populist, but you're also providing leadership and in putting something concrete on the table so that people have something to comment on, as opposed to just throwing the whole thing open.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly where we're heading, and that's why this is a great conversation, is because you both bring up excellent points, and this is how we can get it going. What I wouldn't want to do is stall the whole process for a fear of what might happen before we even get there.
Sure.
So let's cross some of those bridges, and if
Yep.
someone's infiltrating the group, and let's say we had some online voting and someone hacked it, things like that. Like, one of the things that I thought was funny through society is whenever they put an online vote on, like, name this item, funky names pop up on the list, and it gets a lot of support, and then boom, all the way to the top. So I totally get it, especially when you open it up that way. So those concerns have to be addressed, and I think a committee that goes around and does town halls and have conversations is some of the first steps. So I have a Substack where I have a proposal on how we can get to that. I even lay it out on how we could do that, and this is basically it. You start with a core group, and then you start going out there and recruiting ideas, and then come together, and then go back and present it, and then kind of do a couple drafts, just like a legal process when you have several parties involved. But I definitely want to have Albertans and then Canadians to have a direct say in it at some point. Whether it's this is a draft we want to have a referendum on, so then they ratify it at that stage, and then we have a referendum, something along those lines. But I definitely want all Albertans to be part of the process.
Well, and Jason, like, Alberta has quite a few, like two or three right now, parties that are independence focused, that have the referendum to separate as a solution for Albertans, right? And so at some point, if any of those parties or any other new parties that join the scene that also support this sort of a mandate. The whole idea behind this democratic process is that if you get a strong majority, or even like even if you get a majority government, you have, I believe, the moral authority and the electoral authority to have the referendum on independence right away, right? Like,
Yeah.
if that's what you've campaigned on, and you're transparent about it with the electorate, I think that you just go ahead and you do it. You don't have to, um, at that stage, bother with petitions and all the rest of that stuff, right? It's just that right now and there are groups like the Alberta Prosperity Project.
Mhm.
They started off being quite hardline in terms of wanting an independent nation for Alberta. They've kind of pulled back on that a little bit, and got kind of joined the sovereignty bandwagon. So I don't really agree with that approach, but I would prefer just to have the clear question: are we going to separate, and then have the vote on it, and then, like Bruce says, right now you don't necessarily need to get mired in the minutia of absolutely everything and how that's going to look, because I think that there's going to be a lot of input and a lot of opportunities to really, because once that happens, like, if Alberta did vote for, and we like 50% plus one to leave, that's a clear majority, and we're out of here. Like, then we stop, sending, payments to Ottawa for anything. We would create our own stream of income tax. For instance, we would collect all of our taxes here, and we can start doing that. Even now, we don't have the political will to do that now, unfortunately. So we need to be, as citizens, we need to be voting for the change that we actually want to see. And I mean, it sounds cliche, but that's what it is.
100%, and that's something that Bruce highlighted last time we chatted too, is we need a clear question on the referendum. It can't be, "Shall we leave and do this and do that
No,
and
it
do this?"
can't.
It's gotta be very clear, very easy, and,
Yeah,
to the point.
that's
And,
right.
part of the plan can be, as Bruce mentioned before, is a legitimate referendum. That's not an official one, it's one from the people. Now, we have thresholds, and we gotta get certain numbers and stuff like that, but one of the things I really like about this idea is future Republicans, future Democrats, future Libertarians, and future Independents can all get together on this. Because in order to get to that point where we have Republicans and Democrats, we all have to come together and change the system. So this is quite the unifying thing. So the future Democrats of our world, they're going to be part of this. They have to be part of this. And this is why we can't do things like being, oh, this is a conservative movement. It can't be. It has to be a people's movement, because they're all represented through the process. And then at the other side, they're going to end up doing, electing a governor. That might be the very next step that we have to do after we do this. And that's going to require politicking and politicians and leaders to come forward. So I'm kind of excited. This might be one of the first times in a long time that we're all united on something. And then we'll divide again after it's done. But at least we got there, the system. So, Bruce, this is one of the steps. We're going to have to unify all sides on this one. People are going to have to understand it. And there's got to be a clear question on that referendum.
Yeah, and this is the advantage of having the Quebec experience, right? Because the Supreme Court actually gave us a decision on what's required to at least begin the process that we're talking about. And they thought they were talking about Quebec. But what they said essentially was, you need a clear majority on a clear question in a referendum. That doesn't give you the unilateral right to separate, but the rest of the country doesn't have a unilateral right to prevent you. If you get a clear majority on a clear question, then you have a mandate to negotiate the terms of your exit. And in order to get to that kind of referendum, you need to build a political movement, such as by holding an informal people's referendum to demonstrate to the powers that be that they better get on board with this, because that's where the wind is blowing. So there's steps involved in this, and my hat's off to the people in Alberta who are working in the trenches to bring it about, because it's not going to be easy, but I believe it's doable. And that's my perception from a distance. And we have, it's just lucky that we have those tools, including the Supreme Court decision, to guide us along the way and provide legitimacy to what it is that we're doing. It'll be very hard for Ottawa and the rest of the country to dismiss what happens if what happens is in accordance with the rules that were set down for Quebec.
I like that a lot because we don't have to recreate much. We've already kind of litigated some of this already. We kind of have the blueprint. You just kind of need to take those steps now. So, Catherine, I'm obviously making the step to move forward. NotMyKing.ca is a mailing list. So go ahead and join it right now if you're listening to this, and we'll reach out with next steps, because I think that's exactly what we got to do, Catherine. Some of the behind the scenes movement, some of the existing organizations, and then some of the stuff that's just been bubbling up. Now's the time to kind of have these conversations. So if you want to know about the next steps, you can go to NotMyKing.ca, get yourself on that list, and we'll let you know. But what do you think, Catherine? Maybe we should get some sort of committee together, and maybe get a few of the people who are already rumbling in this direction and have a conversation?
100%. And in fact, Bruce and I have been talking. Like I said, we're in the process of, or a group of people that I'm working with right now, of bringing people together, including Bruce, to have this conversation in Alberta. And we hoped to. So yes, the answer is yes. We need to do this. We need to have the conversation. I would like to see it be more of like initially like a panel discussion around the merits of 51st Alberta becoming an independent nation or remaining in Canada. And I think let's revive the discussion and the debate as well. We've become a society where we're so afraid to tackle these really, really important strong issues. And so let's lead by example, and let's have a good discussion and debate, if you will, and let's flesh these ideas out, because it's time. It's going to become even more obvious as the months and years go on. Hopefully it won't take years. We have another election coming up in Alberta very shortly, and I think that there's enough time for us to really move the needle on this issue and start this conversation and start again this conversation.
Revitalize it, right? And I think you're correct. And
Revitalize
that
it.
Yeah, and that election is coming up, and that's a perfect time for the official referendum. Let's have that clear question on that one. We can get a lot of things ready ahead of time. We can get people together. We can get the message out. We can educate, because that's going to be a major step, is educating people what this even means. No, it doesn't mean we're chopping the king or anything like that, but it means we're going to have a lot more sovereignty and start describing it. We don't have to make all the decisions now. In fact, it'd be foolish to, but we can definitely lay out that path. So, Bruce, I'm excited to hear that in other circles, your name's already coming up and you're already participating. I'm not surprised. Because there's a lot of good Canadians that want to see this happen. So I guess we can count on you out here in Alberta.
Oh, well, yeah, you can count on me. I'm gratified to be included in the conversation, because I'm really, I'm really from the outside. So, so thank you very much for including me in the conversation, including this one, Jason. I'm gratified to be a part of it, even though I'm not really in the middle of it.
Absolutely. And we're honored to have you a part of it too. The way you deliver, the way you understand, and the way you can teach, perfect. You're in the right spot. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Now, Texas is a Lone Star state. So, Catherine, are we going to be the North Star state?
I don't know. Who knows, right? I want to encourage people to not be short-sighted. I mean, these are very, really important decisions, and I think with what's happened the past 5 years, especially, that it's really time for us to reflect, get really centered in terms of what it is as an individual we value. How do we really want our society to look, and so this is a great opportunity for us to reflect on that, and to also look at the bigger picture. I mean, we are the term globalist exists for a reason, and we have to be careful that we aren't jumping from the frying pan into the fire in some cases. We
Mhm.
need to understand the geopolitical environment as well. And so it might sound good what Trump's saying, lower taxes and stuff like this, but what else? What are the other strings that come along with that? right? That perhaps states are currently experiencing right now, that are the limitations in the current U.S. Constitution that Bruce talks about. Like we we want to be able to be as close to perfect as we possibly can in creating this new nation of Alberta. And so lower taxes might seem like a really good thing in the moment right now, but we really should be open mind open our minds up as to really look at the big picture on a global scale as well, because there are influences that are happening right now that we need to, as Albertans, I believe, guard against. And that agenda in particular is a big one, and the US is a big part of that agenda, and so we just need to be careful.
Absolutely. And I think this is a good warning for everybody to be diligent as well and make sure that we have a good, robust group who is well vetted. They've got some skin in the game. They know what we need to get to, and we also got to be quick to make mistakes and then learn from them. So not be afraid of that, and step forward. And also be careful we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater too. So there's also
Yeah.
portions of Canada and our society and our culture that we definitely don't want to erase and just replace with an American style. There's certain things that we have to think through for sure. So Bruce,
Yeah.
thank you so much. We've got a couple more minutes here if you want to say something to Canada, but thank you again so much for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jason. It's been a pleasure. I just want to add this, which is, maybe this is obvious, but if you were to succeed in getting to this moment of creating a new country or thinking about a new constitution, when you get to that stage, these things last a long time, or at least hopefully they do. If you think of 1867, or you think of the American Constitution, these things have been around for hundreds of years.
Hmm.
Right, so you can't think short term about this. The changes you put in place have the potential of lasting a long time
Yeah.
for your kids and great grandkids and great grandkids. You're setting up the way the society is going to work, and so don't, as Catherine says, I totally agree. Like, don't be distracted by baubles. This
Hmm.
has to be a sound architectural system of government as opposed to short term fixes.
Yeah, we don't want to be redoing
Yeah.
this in a generation or
Yeah.
less, redoing it. And yeah, amendments are great, but let's try and get it, down packed as well as we can. There's 250 years of US experiment that we can learn from, plus other places around the world. So I think we should be able to put
Yeah.
our heads together and get this done right. Catherine, any last comments from you before we jump off?
Just thank you for having this conversation. I think that the more voices, the better. Jason, let's talk about getting this committee, and perhaps what we're doing behind the scenes as well. But I hope that people look beyond the rhetoric. I hope that people become really make a concerted effort to be mindful about the opportunities that an independent Alberta would would provide for Albertans, and I think the rest of Canada. And I think that now is the time for us to come together for this initiative, and I think we should be encouraged as Albertans that people in other provinces like Ontario are also on board to make this happen. And we're definitely seeing a shift, and I think that now is the time to capitalize on it. So for those people who are looking for this type of a way to get involved, this is I think probably the most important thing and most crucial thing that we could be working on right now.
Yep.
I agree. I think the time is right. So let's do it. But thank you both very much. We'll be in touch. And remember, go to NotMyKing.ca to get on that mailing list if you want to know what the next steps are, because we'll be sharing that out shortly. Thank you all very much and have yourself a great night. We'll talk soon.
Thanks,
And Catherine,
gentlemen. Good
absolutely.
night.
I think it's going to be around Red Deer, the Committee of Red Deer or something like that. Get right in central Alberta, but we'll figure this out.
Yeah,
Catherine, you take care.
perfect.
And Bruce, you have a great time
Thanks,
too.
folks. Yep.
All right, folks. So what we're going to do now is we're going to be cutting over to provide Shadow Davis to you. So I'll be jumping onto his show, and I'm his guest tonight. So if you're a fan of Shadow, you can go to his streams and chat in there, or you can stick around here. we'll be ending the stream on Bruce and Catherine's X. So if you're watching from there, please go jump to the Levine Show or Jason Levine or even Shadow to continue the show. But thank you all very much. I had a wonderful time with our guests, and I think this is the beginning of something very, very special. NotMyKing.ca will send you an email. Thank you very much. Make sure you take care of yourself and your family. And do stick around. The Shadow's coming up with me on it. But thank you very much. Take care of yourself and the family. Shake the hand of a neighbor or a stranger. Why do I keep reminding you all about this? It's because I love you all very much. And God bless.
Hey, welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Thursday, February the 27th, 2025. On the show tonight, our special guest is Jason Levine. Now, what happened the other night when we had Tiana Truth Seeker on was the last 10, maybe 15 minutes of the show. Oh, she revealed, and she'd done this in a video she dropped the day before. She revealed
for health and healing. That's the main reason they made silverware from silver. But seriously, this nano silver from SilverCeuticals is the best and safest silver you can find. There are hundreds of studies and reports on it. I've read some of the studies myself, and it's mind-blowing. One of the things that sets SilverCeuticals apart is that it washes out of your body in 24 hours. No silver buildup and no turning blue. And it won't even harm the good bacteria your body needs. Through your body, but big enough not to fall out of suspension. They infuse it into almost all of their products. It works in facial serums, toothpaste, gels, and even gummies that work to help your immune system.
CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. Call today for more information, 204-808-9292. You'll be reaching out to Kev and Anna, or one or the other anyhow, and they can give you all the information you need on the products that quite possibly will make you feel better. Want to get rid of that rash that's been nagging for a while? Maybe Canada Nano Silver is for you. You want to take a few years off your face? Maybe Canada Nano Silver is for you. Donald Trump threatened tariffs today. Well, he didn't threaten. He actually scheduled when they're going to start. Justin Trudeau responded. Trump responded to Trudeau's response. It's coming. It's coming next Tuesday, but we'll get to that later on in the show. Let's some hellos real quick here. Who's watching tonight? Carla's watching on Facebook from Calgary. Hello, Joycey, Regina, Edna, Jamie, Jeg, Greg. There's an R in there. Hello, Greg. Joyce is watching tonight out in Bothwell. Stephanie is watching tonight in Delta. Kevin, hello, how you doing? Everybody, please don't forget whatever platform you happen to be watching on tonight, whether it's X or Facebook or Twitch or Rumble or Telegram, or if you're all accessing on shadowdavis.com, get this out there to as many people as you possibly can. The information we provide for you guys, as always, is only something that can be found on the independent media in Canada. And speaking about the independent media in Canada, allow me to bring my guest on tonight. It is Jason Levine of the Levine Show and also PPC candidate. What's your riding again, Jason? I forget.
Parkland, Alberta, so just west of Edmonton.
Okay, so you're in Parkland, Alberta. Thank you for joining the show tonight, man. I wanted to pick your brain about everything that Tiana said the other night. Obviously, you saw that, and you probably saw her video from the day before when she started talking about the PPC and infiltrating their groups on social media using dummy accounts and all of that. And she said she'd broken the PPC down into 4 distinct groups of people. Those who really want Canada to survive all of this. I forget the other two, the Max loyalists were one of those groups. The hardcores, the racists, she said, I forget what the other ones were. Maybe people who were just a little bit further right of the Conservative Party of Canada. But then all the PPC bros started coming out and hammering. And that, I think that's when you jumped in and said, hey, look, we got to talk about this. So what are your thoughts on all of this?
She's right. So let's just start right there. She's not wrong.
All right.
So the four groups that she identified was, people trying to change Canada the right way. And I think she would include me in that group. There was a group that thinks Canada can be saved with the PPC, but don't think Max is the leader. So that was the second group that she identified. The third one would have been the rhetoric group, the one that she called racist. And we'll get into that in a little bit, because I think we need to kind of define what racist means in that context.
Mhm.
And the last group that she identified was what she would call the cultists, the ones that are very, very pro-Max no matter what. And again, I think we'll get into the definition of cultist maybe a little bit in order to be fair to that group. But I would also identify there's a fifth one that she didn't mention, and that would be the ones that would include her, that go into the PPC and pose as PPC and infiltrate. It's not a bad thing. I'm not going to highlight that as a bad thing, but that would be the fifth group if we're going to be fair to PPC. Because
Well,
that
you
is
see, the only reason she did that is because Max blocked her on X, right? And she was just asking questions. And basically, and you know this because you're the same as I am when it comes to this in the mindset. We're asking questions we just want answers to. That's all. We're not pointing fingers or accusing anybody of anything. And we report what we identify. And when you ask a question of a politician and he turns around and blocks you, and I'm not saying that Max did it personally, because I'm certain that he's got somebody running his social media accounts, and maybe it was that person who did it. I don't know. But shouldn't you be accountable and answer those questions? I mean, that's, after all, what we are after, is the information. We want the truth. We want the clarity from people who purport to represent us.
You're not wrong. And one of the first things I did when I joined the PPC as a candidate is I removed all blocks, all of them. And believe me, that was an interesting week after I did that, when people realized they were no longer blocked anymore. And you had lots of conversations. But you're not wrong. But let's do remember the particular questions being asked were fair questions. And I actually kind of want to back up Tiana here. She actually has a right to infiltrate. And I love the fact that she does it, because she doesn't do it to just the PPC. She does it to all of them. Okay. So she's doing this to all of them. And that's really the value that she has, is she can try and, in her way, get truthful information, the stuff that people won't put public, because we all polish ourselves up on social media, but maybe we're not all so great when it comes to the real people. So I don't mind her doing that.
Well,
at
she's
all.
an equal opportunity infiltrator. Yes, absolutely.
Fair enough, right? Yeah, and she does call out all parties, and this is why I don't mind what she's doing, even when she's not fully correct all the time, because as long as she's punching up, she's got my support. And Max is punching up for her, and the PPC is punching up. So she's doing the right thing. Where I don't like is when people punch down, or they punch the ones that are standing shoulder to shoulder with them. I like punching up, and that's the direction we should be going. And unfortunately for her, she's received, people punching down to her, and I don't like that. The blocking and the answering questions, I just want to kind of finish up on that. Max has answered those questions multiple times, the specific ones that even she posed in her post. It's not that he doesn't want to answer her questions. He's answered those questions. And you're not wrong. It isn't really Max who runs his social media. He does have a team. He has a social media team, because as you can imagine, it's very verbose, his messaging. And we can get into things like Project Cactus, where there is a lot of effort to actually target Max and bots and those kind of things. It is
that something you weren't even aware of until a couple of days ago?
I didn't know
right?
about Cactus. No, I just learned about that last a week or so.
And there's people right now watching this going, Project Cactus, what's that?
Exactly.
So yeah, we can get into that for sure. And I've got my own theories on that. But anyway, please continue.
Yeah, so I think Max has answered those questions multiple times. He's been on my show, multiple podcasts. The only trouble is sometimes it's not spread well enough, and the message and answers don't get out. And Taliana, she may not have had the answer, she may not know the answer, so she's genuinely asking them. And I'm not going to defend the social media blocking because I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's a bad look, especially if you intend to win the seat. You're going to have to get used to that because you have to remove those blocks. Ezra Levant was successful at a lawsuit that set that precedence. So you kind of have to get ready. And that's why I took all mine off, because I don't want to learn the lesson after a win, how to deal with that. I kind of want to learn that now while I have some extra time for that. So I do agree that maybe blocking is not a good idea. But the questions have been asked and answered multiple times over the
Okay.
years.
Well, I've had Max on before, and I didn't really hit him with some, serious hard questions. I just wanted to get his positions out there because I believe the last time he was on, even the 2 or 3 times he's been on, it's always been during an election period, and you just want to give the guy a chance to get his platform out there and why people should vote and whatnot. But let's throw this up on the screen. This Rene DeVries fellow, who is a candidate in Ontario, in Stouffville. He's a 23-year resident of Stouffville, Ontario, born, raised, educated in the Netherlands, blah, 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 blah. What his profile on the PPC page here says is that he's currently the senior vice president of a large multidisciplinary international engineering firm and has extensive experience in business. All right, so let's throw that off the screen and find out, because they neglect to mention it on the PPC page. We have to go to his LinkedIn to find out that he's the senior vice president of Arcadis Canada. Arcadis Canada is linked and joined the World Economic Forum in 2015. They have been members of the WEF for 10 years now. And I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, we sit here and we talk and we bitch and moan about the World Economic Forum and net zero and all of the ridiculous ideas that come out of there and the incredible hypocrisy of these elitists. The people who fly there in their private planes while telling us that we shouldn't drive our car to the store to get groceries. So how do we square that?
Well, that's a fun one because there's 2 things there. First, I don't like the idea of not displaying the name, but I think if you go to my bio, I don't list any names of the previous employers that I had either. But that's neither here nor there. That I just started looking into that the last few days when I learned about that as well. He is the senior vice president of a really old company that has a lot of business around the world, and the WEF, as you and I both know, they are everywhere. They are everywhere. It's if you are a Royal Bank customer, technically you're got one degree away because they are also listed. It's very hard to get any multinational that isn't infiltrated or touched by the WEF. And this is, I'm not
Well,
defending
being
Renee.
infiltrated is one thing, but when you go ahead and you join them of your own free will, that's a whole other thing. And
Oh, for sure.
there's an article out there that is a pay-per-view, and I didn't want to throw it up on the screen, and I certainly wasn't going to subscribe for one article to this thing. But he said they joined them happily, and there was a big announcement that came out in 2015 about this company wanting in to the World Economic Forum. So it's not like, you're going along with the net zero thing because you have to, because it's been imposed on you. These guys went willingly.
No, and you're not wrong. And it's good to highlight these kind of connections. And I think Renee would probably sit down with you and give you better answers than I'm about to give you. But where I'm looking at it from, because I'm a candidate within the PPC, is whether or not Renee has influence on the rest of our candidates. He doesn't. And whether or not his constituents put their trust in him. And that's going to be decided at the election. But what I would say for Renee, because I have had him on my show and I've had conversations with him, he is very aligned with us when it comes to the climate issue. And when you go through his resume and you actually spend some time talking to him, he's very aligned with the PPC when it comes to the climate and the rest of the policies. And that's what's important to the PPC. Do you align with the policies? Do you want to stop the Paris Accord and all of these things? And his answer to all of those is yes. Now, his industry, like what he's been working on, is in that area. So he's actually seen how globalists and global multinationals are working in that area, and he disagrees with it. So if you actually sit down and have a conversation with him, you'll learn that he's kind of one of us inside of there, which may be very beneficial to us long term. But what's most important to the PPC party is whether or not Renee himself has an impact on the policies and the candidates and would be considered somebody that has influence in order to guide us, and he doesn't. He's just like the rest of us. The 343 is going to be the number of candidates for the PPC. We all have our input, but no one person will be able to change the policy and remove the Paris Accord or anything like that. It's a policy. So if there's a concern of whether or not Rene is influenced in some way through his employer, well, his impact on the PPC is going to be minimal to just his riding and whether or not his constituents trust him. And that's going to be between him and his constituents.
Yeah,
But
but
if
that's the optics of the situation,
the
Jason.
optic's horrible, for sure. Don't get me wrong. Like, ooh, what are you going to do? But that's why I dug into it and I had a conversation with him. And he's aligned with our policies, especially around climate. And he's a bit of an expert when it comes to the climate scam because he's seen it happening from his perspective.
Is that
for
what he
us-
calls it? Does he call it climate scam, or does
He
have
does.
to
He
be-
does. He does. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that's how I met him because when I was first reaching out, before I was even a candidate, I was reaching out to the people who understood that subject better than I did. And his name came up organically through my research. And it wasn't because he was a PPC candidate that I spoke to him. It was because he was an expert in that field. So that's where I can say to him, I think he actually helps us because he lets us know from his seat. Maybe his bosses are very much WF connected. Maybe the projects were very WF connected. But his position on that is very aligned with the PPC party. And as you know, the PPC's party is against the climate scam, and we're going to call it out.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems that, if he was just a guy working for Arcadis, that would be one thing, if he was just a paper pusher, but he's a senior vice president, which places him very high in the company, which means that he's probably been tasked with going to Davos and having to rub shoulders with these people. Has he? Do you know?
No, I don't believe he has. Okay. And that's a conversation I can also continue to have with him. But maybe what we should be asking for is we don't have dual loyalty and we have nobody that's a part of a multinational in the House of Commons. So maybe the conversation should be, are you going to resign if you win? And if so, can you make a commitment to your constituents and the rest of the party that way? But you got to remember, we are a lot of common folks. So we all have jobs and we try and keep things going while we're running. We're not professional politicians. We're not sponsored and paid in any way, shape, or form. So him continuing his employment would be encouraged. But
What
maybe
about
the question,
vetting process? I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the
worries.
vetting process through PPC candidates, 338 of them. And I think Tiana pointed out that in her video, she has gleaned through her infiltration into the PPC groups that anybody can become a candidate. And this is not to disparage you or any other candidate with the PPC, but it seems the vetting process isn't quite where it should be, maybe.
well, I would disagree because I actually went through it. So it took an application on my part. There's some pretty good questions like what is it you're going to run for? What kind of history? What skills do you bring to the table? There's a criminal record search. You definitely have to be Canadian. So you have to be very clean. And you have to have the commitment. And then there's interview steps as well that you have to go through. And quite frankly, we want to make sure that that bar is low enough that the common folk feels that they can come and stand on this platform and reach that bar, but it has to be high enough to ensure that we don't have criminals or people who are not even Canadians getting involved with the process. So there is a vetting process, and what you're also seeing, there's a self-vetting process, and this is amongst what you would call the PVC bros. We hold ourselves accountable like no other party I've seen before. So people like Tatiana is helping a lot because that is also part of vetting. That's kind of a vetting process. It may not be official. It's more of an unofficial vetting process. But boy, do we learn a lot when we go public and put ourselves on that stage. I learned more about Rene than I've ever known in a week or so because of the vetting that's kind of happening in the public space. So
Don't
there's
you
the
think
official
that
vetting, and
when
then
you
there's
thought-
the unofficial vetting.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. The vitriol that the PPC bros come up with, online. And you suggested, what was it, today even, or maybe yesterday, it's all part of being part of a family, right? And I said, yeah, I suppose that could be. But do these guys understand with the tactics they're using on social media that they're probably doing the party more harm than good?
It hurts. I think it would bruise a reputation. There's no doubt there. And look, it's not non-PPCers that get it. I got it too. So when I entered the party, there were some positions that I had, and there were some relationships that I made over the years that some people were not pleased with. And they quite literally wanted me to publicly denounce and basically make a list of things and say a bunch of things. Now, of course, I resist that, and I'm not going to do that. I will handle my business the way I handle it. I don't bow to pandering, and that includes the PPC people. If they're trying to get me to pander, I don't bow to that. And And I think this is why when we get into the next part of this conversation, why I don't have as much familiarity with certain groups, because I'm not really invited in them, because I don't do that. That's against our principles. And we're very strong in our principles, and respect is one of them, one of our core principles. And when I see people not showing respect online, I have to remind them, one of our principles is respect, and you're actually harming us when you do that. But here's where I think it's a benefit. This is just like Tatiana. It does ruffle feathers. It does get people to respond. And in some ways, maybe it is productive. It may seem counterproductive when you see it happen, but here's something that we just saw with Chris Stacey as he was on the streets in Ottawa. He went up to an NDP MP and just asked a question, and then we got to see the real man. He starts swearing and freaking out and all this kind of stuff. Well, if Chris wasn't there, hey, what are you doing here? Why are you supporting the genocide and stuff like that? We may not have gotten that response, which really showed us who we're talking to. So I kind of like that. I kind of like the trolling a little bit, because it shows sometimes who you really are. The response to the trolling, I think, is where people need to put a little bit of attention. And what I don't want to see too much of is when we are attacked and people come at us, so the CPC bros and the NDP bros and all that kind of stuff, that we respond respectfully, and we don't get into this game of being who's the most vile today. And I think that's where we have the opportunity to kind of shine a bit, is how do we respond to this? And over time, I just want to throw some numbers at you. There's about a dozen people that between Tatiana and I can kind of list is basically the same, but we had 840,000 votes in the last election. So those will be 840,000 people to support the PPC. So this group is not reflective of the entire PPC. We have 343 candidates in this next election. This group is not reflective of the entire candidate group. So I would kind of remind people, give us a little bit of slack, but I'm not condoning it. But I also think this is a way to kind of learn, and iron sharpens iron is a term that we use a lot. And I do hope over time we are less vile and far more pointed. And I would like to see things like, well, what part of the policy don't you like? That usually ends a lot of conversations when you ask that as a PPC, or when you ask somebody, what policy don't you like? They kind of go crickets at that point. But when you start name calling or doing that, I'm not a fan. But I've received it too, so it does exist. I'm not going to deny it, and it is something that some of us are aware of. But PPC is not a place where we go around hunting people and kicking them out, because it's really an independent party, and we don't have those kind of governance.
I want to get into that with you in just a couple of minutes. I want to throw this up on the screen first. I want to deal with this, and so I can get rid of this. This is a post from Maxime Bernier on X, and it was October of 2020. I don't know if this is a real, it looks to me like it's a real photo. It's not photoshopped or AI'd in any way, and it's from his official account on X. I love my PPC mask. And then the flip-flop. You see, this is one of the reasons that people go, wait a minute, what the hell? Have you had questions posed to you regarding that photo before?
Deeper than that, so we'll get into that in a sec, but that photo is fun. Okay, it's a chin holder as he's demonstrating right there, and I think he's more bragging about the branding than the mask as a personal protective equipment. And some of the questions I get are even deeper than that. Like, for example, Max is part of the Privy Council, and that scares a lot of people. They're like, wait a minute, so he's part of that? And oh yeah, he is. And that's because he's earned his way there, and he got there through the Conservative Party. There's lots of questions. Like that come up. But at the end of the day, I met Max, I sat down with him, and I've interacted with him a lot over the last year and a half. I trust him. I trust him because I've actually put my reputation in his hands too, along with the rest of the party. And I've worked hard for my reputation, and I'm going to continue to work hard for that reputation. I do trust him at that level, where I think he's providing us a great place to build a platform for Canada's future leaders, people like me who can come forward and represent my constituents. Without Max right now, that wouldn't be an option for me. I tried the independent route, and as you know, that's insane, but it's very difficult. But a platform like the PPC, which isn't a traditional party, it's a platform that lets people like me come forward and represent, the people of Parkland.
Why does
I respect that.
Max spend so much time in Florida? How much time does he spend in Florida anyway? Is it just
a lot less than people are saying? I can tell you that. So many times I see posts like Max is never around. And he's quite literally next to me in Drayton Valley in Alberta when I see this. I'm like, well, yeah, he is. He's in Edmonton a lot. He travels quite a bit. He doesn't, maybe this is something we should start looking at doing, publishing his itinerary, publishing his agenda, so people can see just how frequently he does do travel. And he does do a lot of remote connections. So he's on podcasts. If you want him, he'll make it available. But I don't have a problem with people outside of Canada loving Canada. Tatiana herself is down in Texas. That's not a problem. And
But
Max
she's not running as the leader of a political party, even if it is a grassroots movement and a platform, as you say. I mean,
no,
again,
but she's definitely an influential figure in our system, and she definitely plays a role. And she's in the arena.
She's not running for political office like Max is. And again, the optics of the situation, right? Like if that were Pierre Poilievre living in Florida for 4 or 5 months of the year, he would have no chance at winning the party or the prime ministership. And Mark Carney may have to answer these questions very soon. So where have you been for 10 years, bud, right?
He certainly will.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if Max was doing that as the leader and as a seat, then that would be not very cool. But if you don't mind, I kind of just want to explain a little bit about this Florida thing. A lot of people don't know that that's his wife's property that she bought with an inheritance. And, unfortunately, somebody had to pass away in her family for this situation to present itself. It's a bit of a fixer-upper. This is not a multi-story anything. And don't we deserve a little bit of relax time from time to time? I don't even know how long he's been down there and how often he goes, but I do know I've seen him frequently in Alberta in person, and I've seen him in other places just in the last few months. So this narrative that he's only down there and he's collecting all this money, I would say that's not true. I would say he does travel a lot. He is at rallies and marches, and he shows up at speeches, and he's very impressive when he shows up. So hopefully if he's in your area, you go and check him out and see him in person.
What are, in your opinion, Max's biggest weaknesses and his biggest strengths?
Parlez-vous français? This is a problem out west. So his accent, he is fully aware of that. We were in Edmonton when one of our speakers kind of just put out there, hey, I've immigrated to Canada, but I worked on my accent and I don't have one anymore. And then Max from the crowd said, must be nice, because he understands completely how difficult his accent is, right?
How do you get rid of the accent? Like, do you sit him down, tie him to a chair and say, do, re, mi, fa? Like, seriously, give him some tongue twisters and lose that accent. How do you do that? Move him out of Quebec, maybe, for starters.
Well, or another thing we can do is look past it, because his English is far better than my French. And unfortunately, in Canada, we look for bilingual leaders. So that means 12% of Canada would qualify for that. 80% of Canadians don't have bilingual. So what I'd like to do is use this as an opportunity to remind Canadians, let's get past the accent, because Max's English is far better than my French. But what if we have a leader like me or someone else who's not bilingual that steps forward and presents a good option for Canada? Should we exclude them because they don't speak another language well? I would suffer, much like Carney does. I would suffer in a debate when I try and pull out French. But I think maybe this could be an opportunity for us to remove this as such a requirement and as such a barrier. I do see how it's not fair to Max, because I keep hearing the same thing. He's French, but I like what he says. So when I talk to people like that, I'm like, okay, well, can you get past that French part? And especially Alberta, for generations.
You're originally from Ontario, right?
Actually, Manitoba. So I'm born in Manitoba.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I spent my early days in Saskatoon, and then I spent my teen years in Winnipeg, and then I had my adult life out in Ontario, some in Nova Scotia, back to Ontario. I'm a bit of a Canadian mutt. If you actually look at my history, I'm about 50% growing up in the West, 50% in the East, which gives me a great opportunity to kind of understand a lot of how Canada works. So I know how Ontarians think.
What I was going to throw up. I mean, you understand how it works in Ontario, but you also, because you were born and grew up in your younger years in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, you completely understand the Western distrust of Easterners in general, and specifically Quebec. And when somebody comes like Max Bernier to a rural riding in Manitoba, and tries to run for that seat, they're not going to receive him well, no matter what he says. Is there a way past that, aside from completely losing any sort of French accent whatsoever?
Well, I think what we're going to see is Max, he's running in Beauce, Quebec, so he's going back to his old riding now. He's focused on their needs, so dairy cartel and supply management are top subjects for him. So you're going to be hearing a lot of that out of him. But I think what we need is to get past the fact that Max is even the leader. So when I'm having conversations in my riding, there are people that don't like Max, and they say, okay, well, I don't want Max to be my leader. And I have to remind them, I'm your candidate. You're voting for me. Max is a resource to me. And inside the PPC party, he doesn't dictate to us. There's no whip. In fact, that's kind of maybe some of the symptom you're seeing here with these, what you call PPC bros, is we don't herd the cats. There's nobody saying you have to do certain things.
Don't you
And
think maybe it's time for that?
no, because I think that's what
Make it more
allows us to.
coherent. It needs to be more coherent, and this is why there's 5 subsections of the PPC, as you pointed out earlier. No.
No, but that'll be like asking Canada to be all the same. What you're seeing is a representation of Canada. You're having very passionate people, and you're having very angry people, and you're having more diplomatic people like me, and you have pragmatic people. You have a very big cross section of Canada being represented here, and this is what you're seeing. And I wouldn't want to change that. I wouldn't want to uniform anything other than the 2 things that we do ask. You do align with our principles, the 4 core principles, and you do support our policies and our platform. If you align there, we're good. Now, there's always limits and exceptions, and people have been asked to leave the party before, and that includes candidates. So there is a process that if things go too far, after a couple warnings or a couple attempts, we'll take action. We're not going to be silly that way. But you're seeing a cross section of Canada, and that means diversity, that means opinions. And in fact, one of the things that I don't think people understand, according to our numbers, 15%, 1/5, are CPCs. So that means the rest of the party, 85%, are not conservatives. 40% of that are never voters and non-voters. That means the other 45% are never conservative voters, but they're coming to the PPC because NDP and liberals that are done with the radicalization, the parents, the workers out there who will never vote for CPC, they're politically homeless. They are political orphans, and we find them coming to the PPC. So when people say that we're a drain and a threat to the CPC, the numbers don't support that. The numbers actually support that we are a benefit to the CPC because we're pulling voters out of the Liberal NDP and their bedrooms and their living rooms, the non-voters, they're coming out too. And that's where we're getting a lot of support. And I don't think people realize that. And maybe that's our fault for not sharing that messaging well enough. We are a young party. We're learning how to do this. But that was one of the things that I learned during my interview, and it just blew my mind. I thought it was 50%. It's 15% because conservatives are very strong. They're hard to convince. They're hard to get over. But parents who see the radicalization, they're not. Workers who see the paychecks and the costs, they're not hard to get over. But they'll never end up in CPC. So we get the non-CPC voters, the never CPC voters, and we also get the non-voters. They're coming out in droves to the PPC. 840,000 in the last election. That's a significant number.
What percentage of that 840,000 were non-voters, people who just...
It would be 40%. So about
40%.
250,000 people we dragged out of their living rooms to vote.
Wow.
That's, I think, the benefit of the PPC, because this is what we attract.
Hugely significant number, considering the fact that, what is it, usually about 40%, maybe 35% of Canadians don't vote in the elections.
Correct. And we're doing good there.
If you can bring
and that was double the Green Party. So the Green Party had 300-something thousand votes in the last election. We had 840,000. We've doubled the Green. Now they're very focused in certain areas, so May gets her seat and stuff like that. And we're just behind the Bloc in votes too. So they have, I think, 900,000 or about 1 million votes in the last election. We're 840,000. Yeah. So we are not a small party. We just are very spread out right now, and we're growing. And I think this is what Max did well, that the Reform Party that came out of Alberta didn't do. The Reform Party back in the 80s focused in the West. Max went national, which means we need to take a little bit more time to kind of get to those levels. But now we have a national team. And that's where the Reform Party fell apart. When they became the Canadian Alliance, they couldn't get the East, couldn't get the numbers, kept splitting the vote on the federal voting level. I had to kind of make a deal with the Progressive Conservatives to make the Conservative Party. And that's where I think the wheels fell off on the Reform. At that point, you became Conservative again.
When it comes to when you politically target, when the party politically targets another party, it seems that most of the shots they take are at the Conservative Party of Canada, Pierre Poilievre, or maybe one of his MPs, and not so much the Liberals or the NDP. Why is that?
That's a perception.
Well, the reason I ask you that, it's not a perception. I actually went through it today, and there's a lot of shots being taken at the CPC, and maybe it's the PPC bros who are doing it. I don't know. But it seems to me that they're targeting the Conservatives as opposed to the Liberals or the NDP or even the Greens. And it seems to me that there's just not that many, because let's be honest, the PPC is a right party. It's not anything in the middle. It's not left, obviously. It is a right-wing party. And there's only so many right-wing Canadians, sadly. I think it's because of conditioning of the media for the past 30 years or so. And Liberal Party control over all of our institutions. I believe that wholeheartedly. But when you take shots at, it seems like you're taking shots at your own people. Isn't that self-defeating? I mean, if you split that right vote, then the Liberals stay in.
Yeah, you'll attract a lot more flies with honey than vinegar. And what I've noticed is, because I get attacked too. When I was attacked as an independent, so I got to see it both ways. When I joined the people. Yeah, there was a lot more CPC hate towards me. I lost members and I lost supporters. Like, people actually canceled their membership with me when I joined the PPC. I took a large hit there. But also what we're seeing here, Shadow, and I'm just going to kind of point to X. X is turning into a bit of an echo chamber for Conservatives. A lot of the other side has left. They go and went to Blue Sky and Threads and to other platforms. So we're really being concentrated to be a lot of Conservatives. That's one. Two, Conservatives fire too. Okay, the CPC bros, they exist as well. Whether you want to admit it or not, maybe they're not as vile all the time, but they do exist, okay? When I do a post that says, hey...
they're not as vile all the time, but they're there,
I was saying they're not as vile because I think, some of it goes a little bit too far, but they're also not perfect and angels either. So if I do a post on Trudeau, I usually get good support from everybody, like very little hate on there, because there's no Trudeau supporters really around anymore. But if I do something for Pierre, boy, for example, I put out a post just the other day, and I kind of reminded people that Bill C4 limits parental rights. Therefore, the Conservative Party's position technically is parents first, limited rights. And that's fair, because I'm not saying no rights, and I'm not saying children first. They're parents first, which is acknowledging Pierre's position. But as long as C4 is in power and there's no call to repeal it, they're also for limited rights. But if you say that, boy, you just go look at my threads. You're a liar. This is why the PPC shouldn't be on the debate stage, because they lie. And I'm not lying. Like, it's factually correct, and it's a good observation. But we get it too. Now, I'm not saying it's okay to tit for tat or do that. I do want to make a call out to the PPC side of things to remember our 4 core values, and one of them is respect, and respond with respect. Because even though Project Cactus initiated this large group to come at us, created some of the first narratives that we can't get rid of, and they keep getting repeated basically on every single post I do, I think the way we respond is going to speak more to our caliber and the respect that we have for people if we continue to do that. Now, again, remember the numbers. There's only about a dozen people that I would consider to be a little bit over the line.
I want to talk about Project Cactus in just a couple of minutes, but let me ask one more thing about Max, and that is this.
Sure.
He has, first of all, did he actually originate the PPC? Or, because Tiana pointed out the other night that the party was in existence. A bunch of libertarians put it together, and Max joined it later, or maybe they formed it together. I don't know. But was Max the founder of the party?
I think you're talking about Tim Moen, the libertarian. I think at one point they were talking about merging. I think that's what you might be referring. And if I'm correct, if that's what she's referring to, because there's the 2 parts in her conversation with you. There was that about the libertarian, and then there was about whether or not the Liberals are behind it, and it's Justin Trudeau's team that's doing it. I'll start with the Tim Moen one. Yeah, of course. There was always an attempt to try and consolidate all these parties under one roof in order to have a much bigger base, more caliber candidates. And we have very similar messages. We want a different system. This uniparty is a problem. So I'm not surprised that there have been conversations, especially with libertarians early, about merging, whether those conversations started before the party was officially registered. I don't know. Those are some details that we can certainly look into. But of course, I would have encouraged at the beginning of the party's formation to reach out to existing parties and see if some way to work together. Now, whether or not they could come to the final terms and deals, it looks like they could not. But at the end of the day, I do believe that what Max did, and if you look at him as he was in CPC when he was running for the leadership, he carbon copied his entire platform when he was running for leader, copied and pasted and put it as PPC. So I do believe he originated the platform. It came out of his ideas when he was running for the leader of the CPC. We didn't win, but he basically continued that platform as PPC. Who was involved with that? I would presume it's going to be along the conservative line of thing. He had 49% support when he was running as a leader. So he had basically half the conservatives agreeing with his platform, which included, stopping mass migration and start looking at deportation. Like, he was saying things back then that we say today and we applaud today, but they weren't applauding back then. From my experience, he continued that message, and that's one of the reasons why I like him, is he sticks to his principles. He didn't really change anything. When the media started calling him a racist, Project Cactus did their thing. He didn't change his policy. He didn't kowtow or pander. He
For
went
8
through
years,
and he weathered it.
he has been the unopposed leader of the People's Party of Canada, and
He hasn't been unopposed, though.
well, okay, now I don't know the inner workings of it, so I'm going to ask you, has anybody come forward and said, hey, maybe it's time we do a leadership review and maybe it's time we look at some other people? Because a lot of people see it as a one-man show, Jason.
Oh, I get it. Well, as Tatiana, she highlighted, the second group she said is the support the PPC, but not Max. There's definitely a group that thinks Max needs to go. There's a lot of people, and that would have to be my number 2 message that I get, is if Max wasn't the leader, I would be supporting the PPC. And I get that a lot, okay, a lot. But what I want to say to people, he is not unopposed. There's a whole group that says he needs to go.
No,
It's
that's not what I mean. What I mean is, like, has he ever thought, maybe it would be beneficial for the party? And maybe you haven't asked him this. I'm not asking you to be inside of his head or anything, but I just wonder if he has personally ever thought maybe it's time not to step down, but to allow other people to run for leadership. And if he wins, he wins. And if he doesn't, he doesn't. Like,
He committed to that on my show. So I asked him that question in Drayton Valley. And yes, as soon as the election's done, win or lose, no matter what happens, there's going to be a third-party independent audit that comes in to ask the question, do you want a leadership? It's going to be a leadership review first, because these are expensive. And if that comes back and there's support, then there's going to be a leadership race. And I'm going to tell you right now, live on your show, I'm going to be one of the people that steps up to run in that race. And this is one of my commitments to the people of Parkland. At the very first opportunity, I'm going to step forward and put myself forward as a leader. Now, the reason why I wouldn't push for that now, before the election, is, quite frankly, we got a lot to do in order to get ready for the election and get this seat. And what I do like as an opportunity to PPC and the rest of Canada, if you're listening, now's the time to get on the PPC platform as a candidate. Because after that election, if one or two of us gets in, there's going to be a call for the leader to be one of those people. And if Max isn't one of them, he's not successful, but somebody else is, there's going to be a call that the leader needs to be in the House of Commons. So trust me when I say that process will happen. The second thing I want to highlight to you, Max has not surrounded himself with yes men. He has surrounded himself with people like me, who would be very upset if he tried to hold on and dictate this party after we all put our efforts in. He has not surrounded himself with people that are going to just stand by and let him do that. He's surrounded himself with strong leaders with very good potential to lead the party. And I think that's on purpose, because he does want to have a successor. And that's why the party is a little bit different. It's a platform for people like me to come forward, learn how to speak to the public, learn the subjects, and get votes. And if I'm successful with Parkland and I do get my seat, there's a good chance that I might become the leader of the party, because Max provided that to me. Max has never stood in my way of becoming a stronger leader. He's encouraged me and provided that platform. And I do believe Max never had in his mind to be there forever, to be a forever leader. He eventually wants to go enjoy that house down in Florida after he's done his work.
Has
so
the
absolutely,
PPC targeted certain ridings that they think that they can get? Like, is yours a possibility? And I know you're going to tell me that you wouldn't run if you didn't think you could win, but I mean, is it realistically, is there a shot at it? What kind of response are you getting at the doors?
Most of Alberta has some good numbers for the PPC. There's pockets in Manitoba, as you know, and then pockets in Quebec, and then other pockets are starting to develop. Now, that's an interesting question because I posed that during my interviews before I became a candidate. Why doesn't he just pick a dozen strong candidates and put all efforts behind them and just try and win a seat, much like the Green Party? That's what they basically do. They put a lot of efforts behind just a few ridings just to get those seats. And Max was very smart, okay? And I got a great answer for this because I thought it makes no sense to have like 343, but 300 of them being a little bit weak and 43 being strong, and it made no sense. But here's what Max's response was. First, he wants to make sure that all Canadians can vote for the PPC because he believes that's a right. You should be able to have that vote. Second, in order to become invited to the debate stage, you have to have 90% coverage with your party across Canada. So we actually have to have that as one of the requirements in order to qualify for the debate. And then third, this is a great way to develop the candidates. It's tough. It's tough to be a candidate. Like when you decide to leave your private life to become public, it's tough, as you know. So this is a great way to incubate and generate a lot more candidates. So every election, we have 300 plus people that went through the process. And then we see how well did you do? Well, those people over there did really good. Those people didn't do so well. Those people have potential. It gives us a very, very large base to work with. And I think that's great. Now, I do want to tell you about something. The PPC, even without winning a seat, is already changing Canada, and we're already changing the electoral system. You may not be aware of this. The Canada election rules require that every single riding has their own EDA, Electoral District Association. Okay. This is very, very expensive for a small party because it's very difficult. And this is why the Green Party doesn't go everywhere, is because this is very difficult. But what the PPC has been able to do over the last 6 years through negotiations with Elections Canada is now we can have regional district associations. So we have the Greater Edmonton, Alberta Regional District, which is multiple EDAs in one. Now, because of these changes with Elections Canada, we've lowered the bar for new parties to enter into Canada and actually have a shot in getting into a seat, and by having the ability to have regional district associations. This is something that, again, I don't think we do good enough messaging on, but we haven't won a seat yet, but we're already changing Canada. We're already changing the electoral system, and we're doing it not just for us, but for the next party that materializes in the future. So that bar is a little bit lower so they can go ahead and get some traction.
You know, it's interesting. There's a lot of people who watch this show every night, and they think that I'm a shill for Pierre Poilievre and the CPC.
I get shill for Max all the time, so I know what you're feeling, man.
I get it, and no, I'm not. And I've said on the record repeatedly that I'd like to see a dozen or so PPCs get in, just so they can hold. Because if the Conservatives are going to win the next election, I want to quickly talk to you about these polls that have come out recently.
Sure.
If the Conservatives do manage a majority government in this upcoming election, I would like to see them held accountable from the right side, not just the left side, because that will naturally pull them further to the left than they already are. If we're talking about the political spectrum in the Overton window, where would you place the CPC right now? The middle being, the CPC, the middle being the old Liberal Party. I'm talking about the Chrétien Party from the 1990s. They would be the middle. That's your scale. Where would you put today's Conservative Party? And then contrast that with the PPC, if you would.
Well, they moved a bit more to the right over the last little bit, so let's give them some credit there. But they're definitely slightly right of center. They're way too close to the left. And if this was in the U.S., they would be Democrats. They wouldn't be Republicans. And I hear that all the time. The policies out of CPC is far more aligned with the Democrats in the U.S. than they are the Republicans. PPC is definitely right of them. And I think that's why you're correct. If the PPC had some seats, we'd be able to help guide the CPC more to the right. But I got to I'm going to take this as an opportunity here, Shadow, to kind of put a message out there. The PPCs should be the biggest threat to the NDP because we should become that third choice, that third party. And that'll be a great place to start. Let's replace the NDP with the PPC. I think most of Canada is kind of fed up with this radical left that doesn't even listen to their own base. And we need to replace them. And this is a good opportunity for the West because there's a lot of support in Alberta. And especially if there's going to be a majority Conservative election, now's a good time to have 12, 20, maybe even 30 seats coming out of Alberta and the West to put that balance of power back into a right-leaning party instead of the NDP. As we saw with Trudeau, he would have been gone a long time ago if he didn't have his little deal with Singh. Well, imagine he didn't have Singh there as an option. There was a third party that was right-leaning. On paper, CPC and PPC should be besties. We should be besties because we can go into ridings where CPC is not strong and not split the vote and turn it purple. So if there's ridings where it will never be blue, which exists, a lot of urban, it might be purple. And this is where I think on paper, we really should be working together, not merge because there's inherent distrust, but definitely work together. Let's tackle and remove the NDP from the political landscape. And I think Canada would actually enjoy that. I've done polls. A lot of people would prefer a conservative majority with official opposition to be PPC. But the same people who vote, the same people who will vote that also attack the PPC. So if there was a way that we can kind of make this work, I think if we sit down and put our heads together, we should be besties that hold each other accountable.
Every time I talk to Max about that, I say, would you ever consider working with the CPC? Never. I never wanted, right? He's just one of those that he won't do it. But like I was pointing out before, when you look at the breakdown of the polling and you see how many people are willing to vote for socialist parties, liberals, NDP. And by the way, the NDP in these latest polls are almost completely eviscerated. One of the seat projection breakouts looked like they had 0 seats, which is BS. But we know they're always going to get, 15 to 25 seats, at least in the current state that our country is in. But we're talking about 55% roughly of people in this country who are willing to give their votes to obvious socialist parties. And what blows my mind from the liberal leader debate the other night was they were talking about New World Order and nobody questioned them about it. Like, they're talking about a New World Order. Do you understand that? What does that even mean? Do you have any questions? The media stays silent. So how do we get, another 10% on our side to make it 55-45 more conservative-minded people as opposed to those who would vote for socialist parties?
By taking a look at the success PPC has had already, we have 840,000 people that voted for us. And if you do the number, about 500,000 of those would have been what you called socialist. They left the party and came and voted for us. And that's how we bring them back to the right. There's a whole class of people.
How is it that socialist people find the PPC policies agreeable? That, to me, seems like a disconnect.
I know, but there's something that is a lot more important to them than social programs, and that is their family and their employment. So the radicalization of the children in the schools have moved the parents off of the socialist bandwagon completely. I just had a lefty on my show yesterday, and he was very vocal. That is basically the number one issue that's making a lot of people jump ship, and that's the radicalization, sexualization of children. And the workers, the people actually go to work and they see the grocery bill and they see the energy bill. And that is enough to jump them off of their socialist ideas too, because the one way to get to a socialist is you get them to recognize their own pain. And their pain when it comes to their children being radicalized and their grocery bills doubling, that's a real pain to them. And for that, they would like to get back to normalcy, but they will never go conservative. They'll never go CPC. So they need to go to something that's a little bit more populist, something that accepts them as people and their voices are heard. Like our candidates, about 15%. This number goes across the entire party. But 15% of our candidates are ex-CPCers. That means we have ex-NDPers and liberals that are part of the party, but they're now in a populist movement, which is very different. Like that's against the uniparty. That's against the system. And when people look at the system and say, you doubled my bill and you harmed my child, and my child's asking questions, and I'm not even allowed to address it because Bill C4 says I can go to jail for that. That's enough for people to say, you know what? I want to make sure my community is good and there's a lot of social programs, but my household is now being impacted way beyond what they ever thought it would be. And those are the people who are leaving, the de-radicalized.
This is interesting that you say that, because if we are painting the PPC as the non-establishment party, which is what you're going for here, then when we do have establishment people or former establishment people at the top of the party, there's another disconnect, right?
That's
Would it
what I brought
not
up
be better
before,
for Jason, to be running the party, or Bob from Saskatchewan, or Farmer Jim from somewhere in tobacco country in Ontario, guys like that, or Susan, the hairdresser from Kitchener, right? Just
100%. Now, Susan, Jim, Bob, myself, we now have a platform to do exactly that. And this is what I'm excited about. And this is why I'm fighting so hard. Like, this is my message to you.
Jim, Bob, myself.
Yeah, this is my message to you, is
Picking
because
imaginary people up and you remembered their names.
I will run against them if they're going for the leadership. And I think whatever comes out of that process will be great. But what I want to kind of take us back to is he gives us that opportunity. Yes, he was part of the Privy Council. Yes, he was almost a leader of CPC. Yes, he went to Davos under Harper's direction. Yes, yes, yes. Like, you're bringing up a lot of valid stuff. But at the end of the day, he created the platform. So if Jason or Jim or Sue or Bob actually end up being the PPC's next leader, and then a lot of people get behind that leadership and that party, thank you, Max, is what I'd be saying all the way.
All right, so let's talk about Project Cactus. This is something that you were
It's
unfamiliar
prickly, I
with.
can tell you that. I learned that.
Boom, boom. A couple of days ago, you learned this, and to me, this has been common knowledge for the past few years because of what a scandal it was. But anyway, please go ahead. I mean, it's fresh in your brain, so tell everybody.
Yeah, Project Cactus, apparently, and there's receipts, and there wasn't even a lawsuit around it, but it was an initiative by the Conservative Party of Canada to go ahead and I'll be careful not to say defame, but certainly raise questions and place labels on Max himself and the PPC. And this was a racist narrative, that they were a racist party and he was a racist person. And they were invoiced $120,000 through a PR firm. Sorry, I don't have the name in front of me right now. But this is not denied. The actual CPC party has responded and said, yeah, that's fair game. We do think he's a racist, so we're going to say it. Max sued a defamation lawsuit in Ontario, which meant he had to face the anti-SLAPP legislation, and he wasn't successful. But what came out of that lawsuit was, well, a big bill for Max to have to pay. But it wasn't proven in any way, shape, or form through disclosure, through the defense, that he is a racist. And what the judge's decision was when it comes to political conversations and discourse and free speech, you don't have to be correct. You don't have to be correct, and it's protected. Your free speech is protected. There's a right to free speech. There's no requirement to be accurate. And I agree with that, because it really should be up to people that are listening to the messages to don't believe everything you hear. Like, look into the sources, go and find out more information and become educated. So I don't mind that decision by the judge. And that's also, I kind of use that as protection for Tatiana, because she doesn't have to be correct. And she isn't, but she's very accurate on a lot of things, but she doesn't have to be completely accurate, and she's still protected, and she can say that. So this is why I say, leave her alone. Don't be attacking her.
She doesn't necessarily even say the thing. She makes an insinuation. If it's a TikTok style video, she'll just kind of point at the thing behind her. For example, a photo of Max, standing with a bunch of Chinese people, or him wearing a mask or whatever. And it's a simple insinuation after stating a fact. So I totally get what you're saying, and I totally get what she's saying. But you're right. Freedom of speech is paramount, whether you're correct or not. Do you think that possibly this whole scheme could have somehow been on the Liberals? The Liberals would be the biggest benefactor of having the Conservatives and the PPC going head to head, don't you think?
If that was true, as I said before, 15% CPC. So we're actually take on the Liberals and the NDPs even more. And if that message got out, then you would see that particular conversation go away, because it makes no sense. We're actually a danger to the Liberals and the NDP. Because we also bring the non-voters out too, which is a really large block, and we've activated them like no other party has.
Do you have a percentage breakdown of which parties that you're drawing voters from?
15% CPC, 40% non-voters, so that's 25, and then the other 45%, it's broken up between the rest. I don't have the numbers for Liberal, but it's going to be basically the same as the rest of the population. So about 2/3 of that will be Liberal, 1/3 will be NDP, and a couple others will be Green. But it's a significant portion. And And
Go
what I
ahead.
wanted to tackle was one of the things that I don't agree with what she said
Yep.
was that there's racist in the party, because I think that that term, we got to be careful with that term. Not only has it been watered down and people use it for everything, it also drums up certain imagery that I don't think was fair or true. So if you don't mind, I want to kind of just tackle that one just a little bit.
We're
'Cause
talking about that one faction of that
right.
subsection
Group
of
number
the
3 that she identified, which she said
right.
was a bunch of racist.
Okay.
So to a lot of people, the first thing you put into your head is Jim Crow, that kind of racism. That's not what she's referring to. I've never seen anything like that in the PPC party, even amongst a group that I think is very vocal. I've never seen anything like that, and I've been in a lot of groups as well. But where I do think it's easy to say that that's racism is when it comes to the conversations like immigration. Whether or not that's racist and whether or not you're white nationalist and those kind of stuff. Like when you start heading into those directions, it's pretty easy to say that looks racist or that feels racist.
Well,
And you may
she
not be
was
wrong.
talking about certain euphemisms that were being used inside of these groups that are well-known racist slurs, right?
Right. So I'll get to the next part because I think there's 2 parts to this one. So there's the immigration issue, and Project Cactus did a good job on putting that narrative in place. And then there's the next one when it comes to basically the Middle Eastern war. That particular issue separates and divides people so much all over the place. And the PPC don't have a monopoly or the patent on this particular type of conversation. That particular conversation, yeah, there's certain words that people use, and I don't like it. I don't like seeing it, and I think it's really ignorant sometimes. But that could also look like racism, and it could be. And I'm not saying that there's no such thing as racism. Of course there is. You'd be ignorant to say that there is no racism. But whether or not you can paint the entire party with that brush, I don't think that's fair, because a lot of our candidates certainly wouldn't agree with you, because on Monday we're called racist and on Tuesday we're called too diverse. So which is it? Because the truth is we have a very, very large spectrum of types of candidates within the PPC party that would find it pretty funny to be called racist.
But it goes back to the optics, right? Like we talked about at the beginning. Once you get, labeled with something, it's very difficult to shake it off unless you come up with a mass media campaign that gets a whole new message about your party out there. And I'm talking about en masse, like TV, radio, newspaper, internet, all of that stuff. But it's not something the PPC could probably afford at this stage of the game.
No, and what we need to focus on is doing goodwill and good work, and that's how we tackle this one. Better responses. We put forward our candidates. We support each other in a logical, reasonable, rational, intelligent way, and we focus on getting that first seat, whether it's in the next election or a by-election. We put our focus on that, and once Canada sees the PPC in action, maybe with a new leader, maybe with a couple seats, maybe we're in the House now, we're talking. I think a lot of this stuff, the baggage that came along the way, will just go away, because we're going to be judged by our actions, not necessarily on what it looked like before or what people with a PPC tag in their name did. And also want to highlight one more thing. You and I, we're in this social media world. we live it. Most of my constituents are not on X. Most of them are not even seeing this. Most of them don't even know if the PPC exists. So that's really where our fight's got to be. We got to educate the public who are not on X, are not aware of these conversations, and bring the PPC to them. And that's where we got to put our focus on. It's not going to be losing the battles on X. It's not even going to be winning the battles on X. It's going to win us a seat. It's going to be winning the conversation out in the public space, and actually go and having those town hall meetings, go to the community centers, and just knock on some doors. And those are the people we got to talk to, because when we do that, they don't even know about Project Cactus, and they don't even know about the PPC. So when we introduce it to them, that's where we're going to start winning.
It's
And that's where
amazing
our
to
focus
me
will be.
how many people in this country are still so politically uneducated, and they just vote the way their parents did or the way they always have, or they pick their favorite color, orange, purple, blue. What they do. I go, I don't know.
You're not wrong.
I like red. I'm going to go red. That's it. You're still doing your show regularly, right? Like a couple times
I
a day
am.
you're on?
Well,
How are you
today it was
managing-
four. Today it
No,
was
go ahead.
4 shows, but that's not normal. Normally I'm doing one show, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern, an hour before you, so you can catch and hang out with me before you watch your shadow. And yeah, it's been going really good. We've had excellent guests, and we're now really pushing forward some initiatives. Now, instead of just having conversations, I've got myself involved in some movements now. NotMyKing.ca is my more recent one, because I'm starting that conversation about what would a constitutional republic look like in Canada. Now that we're talking about the 51st state and we're all kind of, open to the idea, at least, to having that conversation, maybe now's a good time to start talking about making a step towards a republic, which would be a requirement, by the way, if we became the 51st state or something like that. We'd have to convert anyways.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you a second here. You're in Alberta. What's the mood about leaving the country, independence, or joining the United States? What's it like there?
40% strong support to separate tomorrow, if we could. That's what I just had a conversation about. So my episode right before this was with Bruce Pardy out of Ontario, and then Katherine Kowalchuk, an Alberta lawyer. Yeah, an Alberta lawyer. And that's exactly what we spoke about. The temperature is high now in Alberta. Trump has reignited a lot of this conversation. Carney has really reignited this conversation. And even Pierre has, because we do want conservatism, but he's weak. So there's a lot of desire that we don't know if we can trust that we're going to get what we need. Conservatives, if they end up with a minority government, they're going to have to compromise a lot more than we're comfortable with. And if it does end up with a minority government or even a minority liberal, well, we'll be pretty upset that they lost this lead. Like, we thought, well, we might get a supermajority. Let's get on that bandwagon. But as that lead starts to diminish in Alberta, we're getting a little bit concerned that we may not get another conservative government. So it's really, it's like a wildfire out here. It's really starting to pick up steam quickly. And this is why I'm pushing ahead with this initiative, because there's a lot of people having these conversations right now.
You've been believing these polls? I have absolutely zero trust in Ecos or even Léger. I mean, I believe that I think the Liberals own them.
They do, and I can prove it to you, because the leaders' debate changed the rules to change it from a popular vote to polls, because they control the polls. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but just a few weeks ago, the leaders' debate committee released a new rule change. It used to be you had to have 4% of the popular vote in the previous 4%, and the PPC had 5%, so we qualified. They changed that rule. It's no longer popular vote; it's a poll 28 days before the election. And as we saw, we've dropped in the polls. Okay, we went from 5 down to 2. I've received multiple, plus my phone myself. I received a text message. Hey, we're just asking about the federal. Who would you vote for? PPC is not even listed on there. So they're in control of the polls. They changed the rules. And Shadow, if they were really trying to change the rules in order to allow a new party with great support to get on that leadership debate, because that's what would have to happen. You need 4% support 28 days before the election. That would be a new party that all of a sudden grew. Well, then you do an or. So you have 4% popular vote or 4% of the poll. And that makes it far more inclusive of everybody. They didn't do that. They removed the condition that the PPC already qualified for, and now just gave us another hurdle to fight for. And it's not just a hurdle to get to 4%. It's a hurdle to get these polls to be truthful. And I contacted Elections Canada and I said, is this not elections interference? And they responded, and they say they have nothing to do with the leadership debate. That's an independent organization. They can do whatever they want. But they dropped the question. They didn't answer my question. Is this interference? If they control the polls and they control who goes on there and who Canadians hear, is that not a type of interference? And I got nothing out of Elections Canada for that question.
Interesting. We should go after them far more on that one, because it's obvious. It's
well, when they made that rule change, only one human in Canada was impacted by that, the leader of the PPC. There was no other party that was impacted by that. There's no new party that's growing that will benefit from it. There was only one person, the leader of the PPC, that was impacted by that particular rule change. And that's not how we do laws in Canada. It's not supposed to be targeted to one person or one role. It was ridiculous. And it really could be fixed by just adding or. You had 4% popular vote or 4% poll support, and then you're in. I don't understand. Well, I do understand. That was a rhetorical question, why they're keeping Max off that stage. But look what they're doing. They're keeping him off that stage.
Dude, this conversation could go on forever. I know you've had a long day, and I do have a few things to get to as well. Thank you, Jason, for coming on again tonight. You guys can find Jason Levine, The Levine Show, on all the different social media, and your website is
thelevineshow.com. And thank you very much, Shadow.
Cool, man. We'll talk to you again soon. All right.
You got it.